For 3 months, my daughter-in-law entered my apartment 36 times without permission. She didn't call it trespassing. She didn't call it theft. She called it checking in. I called it what it was, a crime. Each time she let herself inside, she moved something small. A document shifted. A drawer left half open. A bottle turned the wrong way. She wasn't stealing yet. She was conditioning me, training me to doubt my own memory. And when I finally confronted her, she laughed and told my son I was confused, that I was slipping, that I was just another lonely old man clinging to a pension he barely understood. What she didn't realize was that she had just declared war on a man who spent 40 years dismantling financial criminals, one spreadsheet at a time. The night the silent alarm finally tripped was at 2 a.m. No sirens, no flashing lights, just a quiet notification that told me someone had crossed a line they wouldn't be able to step back from. I didn't panic. I didn't rush. I simply noted the time and waited. Before I tell you how I ended their lives as they knew them without ever raising my voice, take a moment to subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. Because this story isn't about anger, it's about precision. Later that morning, at exactly 11:15, I returned to my apartment. The door was unlocked again, third time that week. The hallway carried the faint smell of cheap vanilla perfume and impatience, the scent she always wore. I closed the door softly behind me and listened. The floor creaked in the living room. Someone was inside. A younger version of me might have shouted, might have demanded answers. But you don't interrupt a crime while it's still revealing its intent. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. The door was slightly open. Through the narrow gap, I saw her bent over my nightstand, her fingers moving fast, careless, entitled. She pulled out my heart medication and shook the bottle, listening to the pills rattle like dice in a cup. Counting, measuring, calculating how much time I might have left. She set it down without interest and moved on, lifting the corner of my mattress, checking the pockets of the old wool coat hanging on the door. She wasn't searching for comfort. She was searching for leverage. I watched her for a full minute, long enough to understand everything. She believed she owned the space. She believed she owned me. She was looking for a will, or a hidden cache of documents, or proof that the man she wanted declared incompetent was still inconveniently alive. "Are you checking my health?" I said calmly. "Or just confirming I haven't died yet?" She didn't scream. She didn't jump. She turned slowly with a smile that never reached her eyes. A smile sharpened by condescension. "Oh, Gerald," she said softly, like I was a child who'd wandered into traffic. "You scared me. I was just making sure you hadn't fallen again. You know how confused you get." I looked at the open drawers, the disturbed mattress, the medication bottle. "That's an interesting medical method," I said, searching my bed and counting my pills. She laughed, sharp and dismissive. Told me I was imagining things. Told me my son agreed I was becoming paranoid. Said she only came to help clean up this dump. Then she brushed past me, hard enough to make a point, and paused at the doorway just long enough to look back not as family, but as someone assessing a liability. "You should be grateful," she said. "A man your age living alone like this, it's irresponsible. Everyone sees it, even my husband." She left the door wide open when she walked out. Not by accident. She wanted me to feel exposed. I locked the door behind her. My hands were steady, my pulse calm. You don't gaslight a retired forensic accountant without consequences. She thought I was losing my grip. In reality, I was just tightening it. That evening, I called my son and told him it was urgent. He arrived tired, smelling like fast food and avoidance. He wouldn't look me in the eye. I placed a black notebook on the table between us. Dates, times, entries, disturbances. "Read it," I said. He didn't. He sighed instead, like a man rehearsing patience. Told me his wife was worried about me. Told me I was imagining things. When I said the word evidence, he called it delusion. And in that moment, I realized something colder than betrayal. My son was already gone. When my son dropped the notebook back onto the table without reading a single page, it landed with a dull, final sound. Not anger, not disbelief. Finality. He told me the list wasn't evidence, it was proof of my decline. Said his wife had explained everything. That I forgot faces. That I left appliances running. That I confused names. Each accusation slid across the room like a blade, and every one of them was a lie rehearsed well enough to sound reasonable. I felt a sharp pressure in my chest, not my heart condition, but something far worse. The realization that the boy I raised had been replaced by a man willing to exchange his father's dignity for domestic peace. I told him the truth calmly, that I had never left the stove on, that I still completed the Sunday crossword in ink, that I balanced my accounts to the cent, that his wife was not helping me, she was cataloging me. He stood up then, his face flushed with irritation and embarrassment, not concern. Told me I was 71, living in a rent-controlled apartment with no assets and no future. Said they were trying to decide what to do with me before I hurt myself. His wife, he added carefully, thought assisted living might be best. A place where professionals could manage my episodes. Episodes. That word hung in the air like poison gas. It wasn't accidental. It was legal scaffolding. They were building a case. If they could frame me as incompetent, power of attorney would follow. Control would follow. Whatever money they thought I had would quietly become theirs. I stood up and met my son's eyes. He flinched. I am not going to a home, I said evenly, and I am not having episodes. Your wife is stealing from me, lying about me, and preparing to erase me, and you are letting her. He grabbed his jacket. Said if I continued attacking his wife, they would take legal action to protect me from myself. Said they were doing this for my own good. Told me not to make it ugly. Then he left. The door slammed. The apartment fell silent. I stood there staring at the notebook on the table. 36 entries, 36 violations. They saw an old man clinging to independence. They saw prey. I walked to the window and watched my son sit in his car, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. I felt a flicker of pity and crushed it immediately. Pity blurs judgment. Numbers don't. That night, I slept lightly. Not from fear, but from instinct. The kind you develop when you know your perimeter has been breached. In the morning, I followed my routine precisely. Black coffee, dry toast. I sat at my desk, really just a folding table, and examined the decoy files I'd arranged the night before. Pension records, medical forms. Boring by design. Something was wrong. The blue folder had shifted half an inch. That was enough. I checked the shelf above the desk, the small cedar box. Inside it, I kept the only thing of real value in the apartment, my late wife's pocket watch. Broken, tarnished, worthless to anyone but me. It had stopped ticking the day she died. I opened the box. It was empty. The anger that followed wasn't hot. It wasn't loud. It was absolute zero. She hadn't taken it to sell. It wasn't worth $20. She took it to hurt me, to make me search for it, to make me appear frantic, to strengthen the narrative that I was losing things. I picked up my phone. "Return the watch," I typed. "Now." Her reply came 3 minutes later. "What watch?" "Gerald, you're spiraling again. Maybe you threw it out like your mail last week. Check the dumpster." She was enjoying this. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to the bookshelf and pulled back a thick tax manual. Behind it was a small black device disguised as part of the shelf hardware. A wide-angle camera, motion-activated, night vision enabled. I installed it after the 5th break-in. I hadn't checked it yet. I was waiting for intent, not confusion. I opened my laptop, encrypted the connection, pulled up the feed. At 3:14 a.m., she entered, dressed in black, moving straight to the desk. She flipped through the files, then reached for the cedar box, held the watch up to the moonlight and smiled. Not relief, satisfaction. She slipped it into her pocket, then stayed. She photographed everything: bank statements, identification, social security card, even the deed to the burial plot beside my wife. That's when I understood. She wasn't just trying to put me away. She was preparing to replace me. I saved the video, backed it up twice, closed the laptop. "You can keep the watch," I said to the empty room. You just gave me something worth far more. Then I opened the closet and took out the suit I hadn't worn in 5 years. It was time to stop acting like a father. It was time to act like a professional. The suit still fit, just looser than it used to. Age does that. It removes excess, leaves structure behind. I brushed the dust from the shoulders, knotted my tie with practiced precision, and looked at the man in the mirror. The confused pensioner was gone. In his place stood someone I hadn't seen in years, focused, deliberate, operational. I didn't call my son. I didn't text his wife. I went somewhere they never imagined I could still access. The glass facade of the Sterling and Kowalski building reflected the city like a polished blade. 40 floors of legal power and financial consequence. I walked past security without breaking stride. When you spend a lifetime walking into rooms where billion-dollar lies live, posture becomes a credential. I didn't stop at reception. I opened the double oak doors to the corner office without knocking. Beatrice Kowalski stood at the window. Chicago sprawled beneath her like a conquered map. She didn't turn immediately. Let the silence stretch. Then she smiled the way predators do when they recognize a familiar threat. "Jerry," she said, "I heard you retired." "I tried," I replied, closing the door behind me. "My family wouldn't allow it." I placed the flash drive on her desk. She didn't touch it at first, just studied my face. Then she plugged it in. I watched her expression change as the footage played. The unauthorized entry, the theft, the photographs. When my daughter-in-law lifted my identification into the camera frame, Beatrice leaned forward. "That's identity theft," she said quietly. "And elder abuse. She isn't confused about you, Jerry. She's hunting you." I nodded. "She wants me declared incompetent. Power of attorney. Control. My son already believes her." Beatrice exhaled slowly. "We can file restraining orders, civil suits, have her served by tonight." "No," I said. "That ends with tears and apologies. I want consequences." Her eyes sharpened. "Criminal? Federal?" She studied me for a long moment. "Then we need intent. This video is strong, but defense will argue implied access. Family help." I smiled. "Then let's remove the family part." I told her the truth, that I didn't rent the apartment, that I owned the building, that 15 years earlier, she herself had helped me place it under a holding company to avoid attention. That Unit 4B wasn't a necessity, it was camouflage. Beatrice leaned back slowly. "You want to turn the apartment into a trap." "I want to change its designation," I said. "From residential to corporate archive, restricted access, federal compliance." Her smile returned colder this time. "If she breaks in after that, it's no longer trespassing. It's corporate espionage." "Exactly." I explained the safe, the rumors, the staged vulnerability, the signs that would only be visible once she crossed the threshold. Beatrice laughed once quietly. "You're ruthless." "I'm thorough. She warned me about my son, that if he stood beside his wife, the law wouldn't distinguish intent from presence." "I gave him evidence," I said. "He chose denial." Beatrice nodded. "Then let's bait the trap properly." By the time I left her office, paperwork was already moving. Unit 4B had a new legal identity. So did my daughter-in-law, she just didn't know it yet. I returned home long enough to move my things. Not many, just essentials. Toothbrush, notebook, one photograph. The rest stayed behind. That night, I slept in the penthouse overlooking the city I secretly owned. Monitors glowed softly on the wall. One showed the hallway outside 4B. Another, the empty living room. The stage was set, and greed, I knew, never misses its cue. The following afternoon, I returned to the apartment one last time, not to live in it, but to perform. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. The space echoed now, stripped of warmth, stripped of history. It no longer looked like a home. It looked like a vault waiting to be violated. I knew she was listening. She always listened. I poured a glass of water in the kitchen and let the tap run longer than necessary. Sound carries through old buildings. Then I made the call. Not to a bank, not to a lawyer, to an automated weather service. Neutral noise. A perfect cover. I raised my voice just enough. I don't care about penalties, I said, pacing deliberately near the door. I want the account closed. All of it. Yes, that one. 500,000. Cash. I paused. Let the number breathe. I don't trust banks anymore. I'm keeping it here. In the safe. No, don't call my son. This is my money. Silence. Then footsteps. I ended the call and opened the live camera feed. She was pressed against the hallway wall, eyes wide, breathing shallow. The moment the number reached her brain, I watched something snap into place. Panic dissolved into purpose. She texted my son without hesitation. The trap had sent now. By dawn, the movers arrived. Not amateurs. Men who didn't ask questions. They wheeled the safe in like a coffin, 800 pounds of steel and illusion. Bolted it to the floor until the structure itself protested. I placed the decoy ledgers inside. The tracker. The labeled file. Estate of Gerald Ali. Then I locked it. The signage went up next. Federal warnings. Restricted access. The language was precise. Unforgiving. By 9 a.m., I was gone. I sent my son one final message. I've moved. The apartment is empty. Left the key inside. A lie, designed to test whether he remembered anything about me at all. His reply came quickly. Okay, Dad, take care. He didn't ask where I was going. He didn't question the dead aunt I claimed to be living with. He saw an open door and stepped aside. That was his choice. An hour later, the hallway camera lit up. Elevator doors opened. She came out first, moving fast. My son followed hesitant, pale, already regretting everything. She tried the lock. It didn't turn. Her face twisted. Confusion, then rage. She shook the handle, kicked the door, accused him of sabotage. He wanted to leave. I could see it in his posture. She wouldn't let him. They argued. She convinced. She always did. When they left to buy tools, I made the call. Tonight, I said calmly. They'll be back. The city darkened outside my windows. I sat 40 floors above them, watching a hallway fill with bad decisions. Greed doesn't rush. It waits until it thinks it's alone. They came back just before night settled fully into the building, not with subtlety, but with resolve. I watched them from the penthouse monitors, as if I were observing insects navigating a maze they didn't understand. She led. My son followed. That alone told me everything I needed to know. First, she tried diplomacy. A locksmith with greasy hands and a one-star reputation arrived, carrying a bag of excuses. She fed him a story about a sick relative and a lost key. He took one look at the reinforced lock, then at the camera in the hallway, and shook his head. He left without taking her money. That's when patience collapsed. They disappeared again and returned hours later with the weight of their intent visible in the way they carried it. A crowbar, bolt cutters, the tools of people who believe desperation grants permission. They waited in the vacant unit across the hall, whispered, argued, calculated. I called the police. Not 911, a direct line. Old relationships matter. They're coming, I said. Armed with tools, silence on the other end. Then confirmation. At 2 in the morning, they moved. She didn't knock. She forced the door like she'd done it before because she had. Wood splintered, the frame cracked, the lock held until the wall didn't. The moment they crossed the threshold, the silent alarm triggered. They didn't hear it. Inside, the safe sat alone in the center of the room, black and dominant. She ran to it, touched it, whispered numbers like a prayer. My son hesitated. He noticed the signs, the warnings, the absence of furniture. This feels wrong, he said. She tore the sign off and threw it away. Drill, she ordered. He handed it to her. That was the moment he crossed from accomplice to criminal. Sparks flew as she attacked the steel. The sound echoed like confession. She didn't hear the elevator doors open, didn't hear boots on carpet. I waited until her greed peaked. Then I turned on the lights. They screamed. Police flooded the room. Weapons raised. Commands shouted. She dropped the crowbar too late. Lasers danced across her chest. My son collapsed. Handcuffs closed. Excuses began. I watched from above. as their story ended exactly where it deserved to. They dragged her out first. She screamed the way people do when entitlement finally meets consequence. Loud, panicked, convinced volume might rewrite reality. She shouted about lawsuits, about mistakes, about family. None of it mattered. Family stops meaning anything the moment you pick up a crowbar at 2 in the morning. My son followed behind her, silent now. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor like he hoped it might open and swallow him whole. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He already knew this wasn't something you talk your way out of. I waited. Timing matters. Revelation is most effective when it arrives at the moment hope still exists. The lobby was filled with blue light and whispers. Tenants stood behind doors and columns, watching the spectacle of shame unfold. Police radios crackled. Paperwork moved fast when evidence is undeniable. Then the private elevator doors opened. I stepped out, not as the man from apartment 4B, not as the confused old tenant they had cataloged and dismissed. I wore a tailored suit, crisp and deliberate. My posture was straight. My expression calm. I looked exactly like what I was. Control. She saw me first. Her face went blank, then fractured as her mind tried to reconcile two incompatible images. The weak old man she bullied didn't exist anymore. If he ever had. Gerald, she said hoarsely, tell them you gave me permission. I didn't move closer. Authority doesn't rush. Permission, I repeated. To break into a secured facility with burglary tools? The officer beside her stiffened. Facility. That word landed hard. My son looked up then. His eyes were wet. Dad, please. I looked at him, really looked at him, and understood something final. He wasn't asking me to save her. He was asking me to save himself from responsibility. I warned you, I said quietly. You chose not to listen. The chief stepped forward and addressed me by my legal name, the one she had never bothered to learn. Here, Knies Bockel. I explained everything then, slowly, clearly, who owned the building, what Unit 4B had been reclassified as, what laws applied the moment they crossed that threshold. She stopped shouting. Silence replaced arrogance. Terror replaced certainty. You can't do this, she whispered. We're family. No, I replied. You're intruders. They were led out in separate cars. The lobby emptied. The noise faded. I rode the elevator back up alone. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt earned. The interrogation room smelled like burnt coffee and fear. I recognized it instantly. It's the same air that fills a space when people finally understand that their version of the story no longer matters. She sat across the table in an orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with the confidence she used to wear like armor. My son sat beside her, smaller somehow, folded inward, already retreating from the wreckage he helped create. She tried one last tactic. You can stop this, she said, her voice low, almost intimate. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Say you invited us. I'll tell everyone you're sick if you don't. I leaned forward, resting my hands flat on the table. Calm is terrifying when someone expects rage. You're not going to trial for burglary, I said. That would be too easy. You're going to federal court. Her face twitched. The evidence folder slid across the table. Video stills, timestamps, signage. Her drilling into steel marked as protected records. She stared at the images like they might rearrange themselves into mercy. Those are just papers, she whispered. Where's the cash? There was never cash, I replied. I deal in records, and you tried to destroy them. That's when the weight finally landed. Not fear of jail, but fear of permanence. Federal sentences don't end with apologies. She turned to my son. Do something. He didn't look at her. Dad, he said quietly. We were desperate. I nodded once. You were entitled. I placed a single document on the table. My will. Or rather, the version that no longer applied. You were set for life, I said. Everything was going to you. Until last night. His breath hitched. Now, you get nothing. Silence swallowed the room. When I stood to leave, she hissed. that she hoped I'd die alone. I smiled. I'd rather die in peace than live surrounded by thieves. The door closed behind me, with a sound that felt final in every sense of the word. 3 weeks later, the plea negotiations took place in a room designed to feel neutral and fair. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a long table that had seen hundreds of futures negotiated down to signatures. She sat with a public defender whose eyes already knew the outcome. My son sat 2 chairs away, hollowed out by waiting. The prosecutor didn't waste time. He laid out the numbers the way I used to lay out financial crimes: cold, efficient, impossible to argue with. Video evidence, forced entry, federal designation, tools purchased across state lines, mandatory minimums. Then came the alternative. A deal brutal enough to feel merciful by comparison. 18 months in state custody, 5 years probation, no contact, no claims, no appeals, immediate divorce, permanent restraining order covering the entire state, and one final condition: leave Illinois within 24 hours of release and never return. She cried, begged, promised change. None of it moved the needle. When she signed, her hand shook so badly the pen tore the paper. That was the moment she understood what real loss felt like. Not money, not status, but control. They took her away. My son stayed behind. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for money. He just asked what came next. I handed him a bus ticket and a laminated card with an address in North Dakota, a construction company, concrete work, 12-hour days, sub-zero mornings, no shortcuts. You start Monday, I said. If you last a year, we'll talk. He nodded, took the ticket, left without looking back. Some lesson required distance. I returned to the building just before sunset. The penthouse greeted me with quiet and clean lines. I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city. Somewhere below, lives were continuing without me. I took my late wife's pocket watch from my pocket. The police had returned it as evidence. I polished it slowly, carefully. "It's done," I said into the wind. For the first time in years, I meant it. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. No drama, no shouting, just the soft rustle of paper and the distant echo of decisions being made for people who thought they were smarter than the system. She stood when instructed, eyes fixed straight ahead, jaw clenched like defiance might still negotiate a better outcome. It wouldn't. The judge read the charges slowly, methodically, like a ledger being closed for the final time. Each count stacked on the last unlawful entry: attempted theft, destruction of protected records, conspiracy. When the sentence was announced, she didn't react at first. It took a full second for the reality to pierce through the armor she had worn for so long. 18 months. No parole. Her shoulders sagged. My son wasn't beside her. He sat alone in the gallery, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He didn't look at her when they led her away. He didn't look at me either. Some wounds don't bleed in public. Outside, the sky was clear. Too clear for the weight that had just settled over all of us. Reporters hovered near the steps, fishing for statements about family betrayal and quiet revenge. I didn't stop. I had said everything that mattered inside a room where lies carried consequences. That afternoon, I signed the final documents. The trust, the donations, the asset restructuring. Everything moved exactly where it belonged. No heirs, no loopholes, just purpose. When people ask if it hurt to cut off my own son, I tell them the truth. It hurt far less than watching him become someone I didn't recognize. I went home early that day, sat in a chair facing the windows and watched the city breathe. Traffic lights flickered, people hurried. Lives overlapped and diverged without ever touching mine again. Peace isn't loud. It arrives quietly, like a door closing behind you when you finally leave the room you were never meant to stay in. In the weeks that followed, the building settled back into its rhythm. The broken door was replaced, the splintered frame repaired. Unit 4B returned to silence, though it would never again be mistaken for a home. It had served its purpose. Some places exist only to reveal truth before they are empty. I received updates through my attorneys, never directly. She adjusted poorly to confinement. Authority does not respond well to entitlement, and prison has a way of stripping illusions faster than time ever could. Every appeal she imagined died quietly under paperwork she no longer controlled. My son called once from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, not out of anger, but clarity. Consequences only work when they are allowed to land. North Dakota did not soften him. That was intentional. Concrete work has a way of teaching humility you can't fake. Cold mornings, cracked hands, no shortcuts, no one impressed by your last name. He sent one letter months later. No excuses, no blame, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond. Not yet. One night, I found myself holding the pocket watch again, listening to the absence of its ticking. It had stopped years ago, but it never felt broken. Some things don't need to move to hold meaning. They just need to exist honestly. I thought about the apartment. The door left open, the lies repeated until believed. The moment I stopped trying to be understood and chose instead to be precise. People mistake silence for weakness. They confuse patience with surrender. That misunderstanding cost them everything. I poured another glass of wine and stood by the window. The city lights reflected back at me, steady and unmoved. Tomorrow would come, whether I feared it or not, and this time I was ready. Time has a way of exposing which decisions were fueled by emotion and which were built on truth. Months passed, then a year, and the noise around what happened faded into something quieter acceptance. People in the building stopped whispering. New tenants moved in without knowing the history of Unit 4B. To them, it was just another door in a long hallway. To me, it was a reminder of how close I came to disappearing without anyone noticing. I resumed a routine, but not the one I had before. This life was intentional. Mornings began with silence instead of dread. I read, I walked. I chose where my attention went instead of reacting to where others pushed it. That freedom was worth more than any inheritance I could have left behind. Every so often, my attorneys updated me on my son. He showed up to work. He didn't quit. He didn't ask for favors. The cold did its job, so did responsibility. It stripped away entitlement and left something raw but usable underneath. Redemption, if it came at all, would not be cheap. As for her, the update stopped entirely. That was the point. She had exited my life completely, no shadow, no echo, no unfinished argument waiting to reopen itself. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the skyline, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires ongoing connection. I had none. What remained was clarity. I had not destroyed a family. I had confronted a pattern and refused to continue enabling it. The cost was high, but the alternative would have been erasure. I stood by the window and watched the city transition into night. Somewhere, people were making the same mistakes I once tolerated. They would learn in their own time or not at all. Either way, it was no longer my problem. There's a myth. People cling to that blood automatically means loyalty. That shared history guarantees shared values. I believed that once. I believed that if I stayed calm enough, patient enough, eventually the people closest to me would remember who I was to them. What I learned instead is that entitlement doesn't wake up on its own. It has to be confronted, and confrontation is rarely gentle. I began receiving letters from people I hadn't heard from in years, distant relatives, old colleagues, even strangers who had read about the case in a small legal journal that analyzed unusual elder abuse prosecutions. They praised my restraint, my intelligence, my revenge. I didn't correct them, but I didn't accept the label either. Revenge is emotional. What I did was corrective. Correction doesn't raise its voice. I also began mentoring again, quietly. Young analysts, auditors who still believed numbers were boring. I showed them how patterns form, how behavior leaves signatures long before crimes are obvious. I taught them the same lesson my family learned the hard way. If something feels wrong, it usually is, and ignoring it only makes the fallout worse. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the version of myself that almost vanished. The man who doubted his own memory, who questioned his instincts, who stood in his own kitchen wondering if he really had lost his grip. That man didn't fail because he was weak. He failed because he trusted the wrong people. Trust, I learned, is not a virtue. It's a calculation. When you give it to someone who hasn't earned it, you aren't being kind. You're being careless. I didn't make that mistake again. One morning, nearly 2 years after everything ended, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was brief. No greeting. No apology, wrapped in excuses. I stayed the full year. I'm still working. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. That message told me more than any explanation ever could. It wasn't repentance. It wasn't redemption. It was accountability, and that was the first real sign of adulthood I'd seen from my son in a very long time. I didn't respond right away. Growth doesn't need instant validation. That afternoon, I walked through the city without direction, letting the noise pass through me instead of around me. I passed offices where people worked late, chasing promotions that wouldn't remember their names. I passed apartments filled with arguments that sounded eerily familiar. I felt no urge to intervene. Everyone earns their lessons on their own schedule. When I returned home, I unlocked the drawer where I kept old documents I never planned to use again. Audit notes, case files, evidence from lives I dismantled professionally and ethically. I realized something then. What happened with my family wasn't an anomaly. It followed the same pattern as every major financial crime I'd ever investigated. Access, opportunity, rationalization. They didn't think they were evil. They thought they were entitled. That belief is more dangerous than malice. I poured myself a drink and sat down, feeling the quiet weight of finality settle in my chest, not heavy, not sad, just complete. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. They end with understanding, and that I had finally earned. I eventually replied to my son, not with forgiveness, not with conditions, just acknowledgement. Good, I wrote. Keep going. That was all. People imagine closure as something dramatic: tears, reunions, confessions that erase damage. Real closure is quieter. It's the absence of anxiety when your phone rings. It's the certainty that no one is watching your door, waiting for weakness. I sold the building the following spring, not because I needed the money, but because I no longer needed the reminder. Some chapters serve their purpose and then deserve to be closed completely. The proceeds went where I had planned: funds for victims of elder abuse, legal aid for people whose families tried to erase them quietly. That felt right. On my 73rd birthday, I didn't celebrate. I cooked for myself, sat by the window, let the city exist without demanding anything from it. I checked the time using Catherine's pocket watch. Still broken, still perfect. I thought about how close I came to becoming invisible, how easily it could have happened if I'd stayed silent 1 week longer, if I doubted myself just a little more. People like to believe monsters look obvious. They don't. Sometimes they wear concern. Sometimes they bring soup. Sometimes they tell you they're just checking in. That's why I tell this story now. Not for sympathy, not for applause, but as a warning. If someone keeps moving your things, questioning your memory, measuring your decline, pay attention. They're not worried about you. They're preparing to replace you. I live quietly now, not because I'm afraid of attention, but because silence has finally become a choice instead of a consequence. My days are simple by design. I wake when I want. I read without interruption. I walk without checking who's behind me. There is no tension in my chest when a door creaks or a phone vibrates. Peace, I've learned, isn't something you stumble into, it's something you defend. People sometimes ask if I regret how far it went, if I regret letting the law do what families are supposed to handle privately. I tell them the truth. What happened wasn't the destruction of a family. It was the exposure of one. Families don't steal identities. They don't weigh medicine bottles. They don't quietly build narratives to erase the inconvenient. Those things belong to predators, not relatives. I never raised my voice. I never struck anyone. I didn't threaten. I documented. I waited. And when the moment came, I let consequences speak in a language they understood. Power doesn't announce itself. It acts when silence is mistaken for weakness. My son is still working. We speak occasionally, carefully, without illusions. That's enough. Redemption, if it comes, will arrive slowly and without guarantees. That's the price of trust once it's been broken. As for her, she vanished from my life completely. No echoes, no revenge fantasies, just absence. And that absence is a relief I never imagined I'd feel so fully. If there is one lesson worth leaving behind, it's this. Respect is not inherited, and love does not require self-erasure. The moment someone begins preparing your disappearance, you are no longer obligated to protect their comfort. I was underestimated because I was quiet. I was nearly erased because I was patient. I survived because I stopped explaining and started observing. And in the end, I didn't destroy anyone. I simply stepped aside and let the truth finish the job. Thank you for watching. Remember, betrayal whispers, but truth speaks loud.